The dense forest loomed ahead, its ancient trees twisted and gnarled, casting long, sinister shadows in the fading light of the day. Greta and Henrik, two siblings in their early teens, stood at the edge of the foreboding woods. Greta, the elder by 2 years, clutched Henrik's hand tightly, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on her slender shoulders. Their village had fallen into hard times. Crops withered in the fields, and the once plentiful game had all but disappeared. Rumors of dark magic and malevolent spirits spread like wildfire, leaving the villagers in a state of perpetual fear. Desperate to save their family from starvation, Greta and Henrik's mother had sent them into the forest to seek out an old herbalist known for her uncanny knowledge of the land. "Remember, children," their mother had whispered, her voice trembling. "You must find the old woman who lives deep in the woods. She can help us, but be cautious, for the forest is not a safe place after dark." The siblings exchanged a determined look, their hearts beating in unison as they stepped into the labyrinthine forest. The path was barely visible, overgrown with tangled vines and thorny brambles that seemed to reach out and snag at their clothes. Each step they took echoed with the rustling of leaves and the occasional snap of a twig, making them jump at the slightest sound. As they ventured deeper, the trees grew closer together, their branches intertwining to form an almost impenetrable canopy above. The sunlight waned, casting the forest floor into an eerie twilight. Greta kept her eyes sharp, scanning for any sign of the herbalist's dwelling, while Henrik tried to keep his fear at bay by humming softly to himself. "Do you think we'll find her, Greta?" Henrik asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We have to," Greta replied, squeezing his hand reassuringly. "For Mother." Hours seemed to pass as they trudged through the forest, their hope waning with the light. Just as the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, they spotted a faint glow in the distance. It was a soft golden light, flickering like a candle flame. "Look!" Henrik exclaimed, pointing towards the light. "That must be it." They hurried towards the glow, their hearts lifting with anticipation. As they approached, the light grew brighter, revealing a small, crooked cottage nestled among the trees. The walls were made of weathered stone, and the thatched roof was covered in moss. A thin plume of smoke rose from the chimney, mingling with the mist that crept along the ground. Greta hesitated at the door, her hand poised to knock. She could feel a strange energy emanating from the cottage, a sense of something ancient and powerful. Before she could change her mind, the door creaked open, and an old woman stood in the threshold. Her hair was a wild tangle of silver, and her eyes gleamed with an unsettling intelligence. "Well, well, what have we here?" the old woman crooned, her voice like the rustling of dry leaves. "Two lost children seeking shelter in the dark woods." Greta swallowed hard, her mouth suddenly dry. "We were sent to find you. Our mother said you could help us." The old woman smiled, revealing teeth that were unnaturally sharp. Come in. The forest is no place for young ones after dark." Reluctantly, the siblings stepped inside. The interior of the cottage was dimly lit by a single candle, its flame casting flickering shadows on the walls. Herbs and dried plants hung from the rafters, filling the air with their pungent scent. A large cauldron simmered over the hearth, releasing an earthy, herbal aroma. The old woman gestured for them to sit at a rough wooden table. "Tell me, children, what brings you to my humble abode?" Greta explained their plight, her voice trembling as she recounted the hardships their family had faced. The old woman listened intently, her sharp eyes never leaving Greta's face. When she finished, there was a long silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire. "I see," the old woman said finally, her voice thoughtful. "I can help you, but the path you must take is not an easy one. There are dangers in these woods, ancient spirits and dark creatures that would do you harm." Henrik shivered, but Greta set her jaw determined. "We'll do whatever it takes." The old woman nodded, a glint of approval in her eyes. "Very well, but remember, the forest is alive. It listens, it watches, and it does not take kindly to those who trespass with ill intent. You must be pure of heart and strong of will. With that, she handed Greta a small leather pouch. "This will guide you," she said cryptically. "Now go, and may the spirits of the forest watch over you." Greta and Henrik left the cottage, the pouch clutched tightly in Greta's hand. As they stepped back into the night, the forest seemed to close in around them, the shadows growing deeper and more menacing. But despite the fear gnawing at their hearts, they pressed on, determined to save their family. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with unseen terrors and ancient magic. But Greta and Henrik were no ordinary children. They were survivors, bound by a love that no darkness could extinguish. And as they ventured further into the heart of the forest, they knew that they would face whatever horrors lay ahead. Together, the forest grew darker as Greta and Henrik pressed onward, their only light coming from the small pouch given to them by the old woman. Its faint, ethereal glow barely cut through the oppressive gloom that surrounded them. Every now and then, they would hear the rustle of leaves or the distant call of an owl, sounds that seemed to echo unnaturally through the trees. Greta tried to stay focused, her mind racing with questions about the old woman's cryptic warnings. She glanced down at the pouch, wondering what kind of magic it held, and how it would guide them through the labyrinthine woods. "Do you think we'll be all right?" Henrik asked, his voice trembling despite his efforts to sound brave. "We have to be," Greta replied firmly. "We don't have any other choice." As they walked, they noticed the forest starting to change. The trees seemed to close in around them, their branches forming twisted, grotesque shapes that cast eerie shadows on the ground. The air grew colder, and an unnatural silence settled over the woods, broken only by the sound of their footsteps. Suddenly, a faint whisper reached Greta's ears. She stopped in her tracks, straining to hear. "Did you hear that?" she asked Henrik, her eyes wide with concern. Henrik nodded, his face pale. It sounded like someone whispering. They stood still, listening intently. The whisper came again, faint and indistinct, like the murmur of the wind through the leaves. But this was no ordinary wind. It carried with it a sense of malevolence, a feeling that they were being watched. "We should keep moving," Greta said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "The sooner we find a way out of here, the better." As they continued, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. It felt as if the very forest was speaking to them, its voice filled with ancient secrets and dark intentions. The siblings tried to ignore the voices, but they seemed to seep into their minds, filling their thoughts with dread. After what felt like hours, they stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood an ancient stone well, covered in moss and surrounded by strange, glowing mushrooms. The air around the well felt charged with energy, and the whispers grew louder, almost urgent. "Do you think this is the place?" Henrik asked, looking around nervously. Greta approached the well cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. She peered over the edge, but the darkness within was impenetrable. The whispers seemed to emanate from the well, their voices blending together into a haunting chorus. "We have to find out," Greta said, her voice steady despite her fear. This might be what the old woman meant. She reached into the pouch and pulled out a small, polished stone. As she held it over the well, it began to glow brightly, illuminating the darkness below. The whispers intensified, swirling around them like a tangible force. "Greta, be careful," Henrik warned, his eyes wide with fear. Ignoring his plea, Greta dropped the stone into the well. It fell silently into the depths, its light growing fainter as it descended. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled, and a deep, resonant voice echoed from the well. "Who dares disturb my slumber?" The siblings recoiled in terror, clutching each other for support. The voice was ancient and powerful, filled with a presence that seemed to reverberate through their very bones. We seek your guidance," Greta stammered, trying to sound brave. "Our village is in danger, and we were told you could help us." There was a long, ominous silence. Then the voice spoke again, its tone filled with dark amusement. "Very well. If you wish for my aid, you must prove yourselves worthy. There is a path you must follow, a trial you must endure, Only then will you find what you seek." Before they could respond, the ground beneath them shifted, revealing a hidden path that led deeper into the forest. The trees along the path seemed to writhe and twist, their branches forming grotesque shapes that loomed over them menacingly. Greta and Henrik exchanged a determined glance. They had come too far to turn back now. Taking a deep breath, they stepped onto the path, their hearts filled with a mixture of fear and resolve. The journey ahead was fraught with peril, the forest alive with unseen dangers and ancient magic. But Greta and Henrik knew they had to press on, for the fate of their family, and perhaps their very souls, depended on it. As they ventured deeper into the heart of the woods, the whispers followed them, a constant reminder of the dark forces that watched their every move. But despite the fear that gnawed at their hearts, they pressed on, determined to face whatever trials lay ahead. Together, the hidden path wound deeper into the forest, leading Greta and Henrik into a realm where light barely penetrated the dense canopy above. The air grew colder with each step, and the whispers seemed to coalesce into a low, menacing hum that echoed through the trees. The path was lined with grotesque statues, their stone faces twisted in expressions of agony and despair, as if they were souls trapped in eternal torment. The siblings walked in silence, their eyes darting nervously from shadow to shadow. The forest seemed to pulse with a dark energy, its ancient magic seeping into their very bones. Greta held Henrik's hand tightly, feeling his fear mirrored in her own heart. "Stay close," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the eerie hum. "We don't know what's waiting for us." They continued on, the path growing narrower and more treacherous. Twisted roots and thorny brambles reached out to snag at their clothes, and the ground was uneven, littered with fallen branches and jagged rocks. It was as if the forest itself was trying to hinder their progress. After what felt like hours, they reached a clearing where the path split into 3 separate trails, each leading in a different direction. In the center of the clearing stood a tall, ancient tree, its bark blackened and scarred. Hanging from its branches were dozens of tattered ribbons, fluttering in the cold breeze like ghostly remnants of lost souls. "What now?" Henrik asked, his voice trembling. Greta studied the 3 paths, her mind racing. Each one seemed equally dark and foreboding, and there were no signs to indicate which way they should go. She felt a wave of despair wash over her, but she pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. "We need to choose wisely," she said, trying to sound confident. "There has to be a clue here somewhere." As she spoke, the whispers grew louder, forming words that seemed to come from the very air around them. "Choose wisely. Only one will lead to safety." Henrik shivered, his eyes wide with fear. What if we choose the wrong one? Greta took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She reached into the pouch the old woman had given them, hoping to find something that would guide them. To her surprise, the pouch began to glow, its light growing brighter as she held it over each path. When she held it over the middle path, the glow intensified, casting a warm, golden light that seemed to banish the shadows. Greta felt a sense of calm wash over her, and she knew this was the way they needed to go. "This one," she said, pointing to the middle path. "It's the only one that feels right." Henrik nodded, trusting her judgment. Together, they stepped onto the middle path, the light from the pouch guiding their way. As they walked, the air grew warmer, and the oppressive darkness began to lift. The whispers faded, replaced by the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. But their relief was short-lived. After a few minutes, they came upon a massive stone archway, covered in strange, glowing runes. Beyond the archway, the path continued, but it was guarded by a tall, shadowy figure, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "Who dares to enter my domain?" the figure intoned, its voice echoing like a thunderclap. Greta and Henrik froze, their hearts pounding. The figure stepped forward, revealing itself to be a towering creature made of shadows, its form shifting and writhing like smoke. It had no discernible face, but its eyes burned with a malevolent intelligence. "We seek passage," Greta said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We were sent by the old woman who lives in the forest." The shadowy figure regarded them for a moment, its eyes narrowing. "To pass, you must prove your worth. Face the trial of shadows and emerge victorious, or be consumed by the darkness." Without waiting for a response, the figure raised its hand, and the ground beneath them began to tremble. The air grew thick with an oppressive energy, and the forest around them seemed to blur and twist, as if reality itself was being warped. Suddenly they were no longer standing on the path. Instead, they found themselves in a dark, cavernous space, the walls lined with glowing runes that pulsed with an eerie light. In the center of the cavern stood a pedestal, upon which rested a small, ornate box. "Retrieve the box and bring it to me," the figure's voice echoed through the cavern. "But beware, for the shadows are alive and they hunger for your light." As the voice faded, the cavern grew darker, the shadows seeming to creep closer, their shapes shifting and writhing like living beings. Greta and Henrik exchanged a worried glance, but there was no turning back now. "We have to get that box," Greta said, her voice firm. "Stay close, and whatever happens, don't let go of my hand." Henrik nodded, gripping her hand tightly. Together they made their way towards the pedestal, their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. The shadows seemed to reach out for them, their touch cold and clammy, sending shivers down their spines. As they neared the pedestal, the shadows grew more aggressive, swirling around them like a dark tide. Greta could feel their malevolent presence pressing in on her, trying to sap her strength and fill her mind with fear. But she pushed on, focusing on the box and the light from the pouch. With a final, desperate effort, they reached the pedestal. Greta grabbed the box, feeling a surge of power as she lifted it from its resting place. The shadows recoiled, hissing in anger, but they did not retreat. "Let's go!" she shouted, pulling Henrik towards the cavern's entrance. The shadows swarmed around them, trying to block their path, but the light from the box seemed to repel them, creating a small bubble of safety. They ran as fast as they could, the darkness pressing in from all sides. Just as they reached the archway, the shadowy figure reappeared, its eyes burning with anger. "You have the box," it said, its voice filled with a dangerous edge. "But the trial is not yet over." Before they could react, the figure lunged at them, its form shifting and expanding until it enveloped them in darkness. Greta felt a cold, crushing pressure, as if the very air was being sucked from her lungs. She held onto Henrik tightly, refusing to let go. In the darkness, a faint light began to glow, emanating from the box in Greta's hands. It grew brighter and brighter, pushing back the shadows until they were bathed in a warm, golden light. The pressure lifted, and they found themselves back on the path, the shadowy figure nowhere to be seen. They collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. The box in Greta's hands pulsed with a gentle, reassuring light, and she knew they had passed the trial. "We did it," Henrik said, his voice filled with awe and relief. Greta nodded, too exhausted to speak. As they rested, the light from the box illuminated the path ahead, revealing a new trail that led deeper into the forest. They had survived the trial of shadows, but their journey was far from over. With renewed determination, they got to their feet and continued on, the box guiding their way. The forest was still filled with dangers and dark magic, but Greta and Henrik knew they were not alone. Together, they would face whatever trials lay ahead, their bond unbreakable and their hearts filled with hope. The path ahead was illuminated by the soft glow of the box, casting long shadows that danced and flickered in the dark forest. Greta and Henrik walked in silence, their minds still reeling from the trial they had just endured. The forest seemed to be alive with a sinister energy, its ancient magic pulsating through the air. As they ventured deeper, the whispers returned, but this time they were softer, almost soothing. The path began to widen, and the oppressive darkness gradually gave way to a dim, ethereal light. The trees here were different, their branches adorned with shimmering leaves that glowed with an otherworldly radiance. "We must be getting closer," Henrik said, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Greta nodded, her eyes scanning the forest for any signs of danger. The light from the box grew stronger, guiding them towards a large clearing up ahead. As they stepped into the open space, they were met with a breathtaking sight. The clearing was bathed in a soft golden light that seemed to emanate from the ground itself. In the center stood a massive, ancient tree, its trunk twisted and gnarled, with branches that stretched towards the sky like the arms of a giant. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers, and the ground was covered in a carpet of vibrant, glowing moss. "This place is beautiful," Henrik whispered, his eyes wide with wonder. "Yes, but remember what the old woman said," Greta cautioned. "The forest is alive, and not everything here is as it seems." They approached the ancient tree, drawn by the light that seemed to pulse from within its trunk. As they neared, they noticed a small, intricately carved door set into the base of the tree. Greta reached out and touched the door, feeling a warm, tingling sensation spread through her fingers. "Do you think this is it?" Henrik asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's only one way to find out," Greta replied, pushing the door open. The door swung open silently, revealing a narrow staircase that spiraled down into the earth. The light from the box illuminated the steps, casting long shadows on the walls. With a deep breath, Greta led the way, Henrik following close behind. The staircase seemed to go on forever, winding deeper and deeper into the ground. The air grew colder, and the walls became damp and covered in strange glowing fungi. Finally, they reached the bottom, where a large circular chamber awaited them. The chamber was filled with an eerie, pulsating light that seemed to emanate from the very walls. In the center of the room stood a stone altar, upon which rested a large, ornate book. The book's cover was made of dark, weathered leather, and it was adorned with strange, glowing runes. "Is this what we're supposed to find?" Henrik asked, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. Greta approached the altar, her eyes fixed on the book. "It must be. The old woman said we needed to prove ourselves, and this feels like the final test." As she reached for the book, a voice echoed through the chamber, cold and commanding. "Only those pure of heart and strong of will may touch the book. Prove yourselves worthy, or face the consequences." Greta hesitated, her hand hovering over the book. She looked at Henrik, who nodded encouragingly. Taking a deep breath, she placed her hand on the book's cover. The runes began to glow brightly, and the air around them crackled with energy. The chamber seemed to come alive, the walls pulsating with light, and the ground trembling beneath their feet. Greta felt a surge of power coursing through her, and for a moment, she thought she might be consumed by it. But then, the light dimmed, and the chamber fell silent. Greta opened the book, revealing pages filled with ancient flowing script. As she read the words, a sense of understanding washed over her, and she knew what they needed to do. "This book contains the knowledge we need to save our village," she said, her voice filled with awe. "It's a guide to the ancient magic that governs this forest. But it also warns of great danger. We must be careful." Henrik looked at the book, his eyes wide with curiosity. "What does it say?" Greta skimmed through the pages, her eyes darting over the intricate script. "It speaks of a powerful artifact, hidden deep within the forest. An artifact that can break the curse and restore balance to the land. But it's guarded by a creature of immense power, a guardian that will stop at nothing to protect it." "We have to find it," Henrik said, determination in his voice. "For our family and for our village." Greta nodded, closing the book and placing it carefully back on the altar. "We do, but we must be prepared for whatever lies ahead. This guardian will be our greatest challenge yet." As they turned to leave the chamber, the voice echoed once more. "Remember, children, the forest is alive. It watches, it listens. Trust in each other and in your own strength. Only then will you succeed." With those words ringing in their ears, Greta and Henrik began their ascent back up the spiral staircase. The light from the box guided their way, casting a warm glow that banished the shadows. They emerged from the ancient tree, the enchanted glade bathed in the soft light of dawn. The journey ahead was fraught with danger, but they were no longer the frightened children who had entered the forest. They were stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever trials lay ahead. As they set off on the next leg of their journey, the whispers of the forest followed them, a constant reminder of the ancient magic that surrounded them. But Greta and Henrik knew they had each other, and that was a strength no darkness could overcome. Together, they would face the Guardian, find the artifact, and save their village. No matter what horrors awaited them in the heart of the forest, they would not falter, for they were bound by a love and a determination that no curse could break. Greta and Henrik ventured deeper into the heart of the forest, guided by the knowledge they had gained from the ancient book. The whispers had faded, replaced by an eerie silence that pressed in around them like a tangible force. The path grew steeper, and the air became heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. After hours of trekking, they reached a vast, shadowy cavern, its entrance framed by towering, jagged rocks. The air inside was thick and cold, filled with a palpable sense of foreboding. Greta and Henrik exchanged a determined glance, then stepped into the darkness, the light from the box their only guide. As they descended into the cavern, they heard a low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the very stones beneath their feet. They reached a massive chamber, its walls covered in ancient runes that glowed with a faint, otherworldly light. In the center of the chamber stood a colossal stone pedestal, and atop it rested a shimmering, crystalline artifact. But between them and the artifact loomed the Guardian, a monstrous creature, its body composed of shifting shadows and burning eyes. It rose to its full height, towering over them, its presence radiating a fearsome power. "Who dares enter my domain?" The Guardian's voice boomed, echoing through the chamber. "We seek the artifact to save our village," Greta said, her voice steady despite her fear. "We have proven ourselves worthy." The Guardian's eyes narrowed, its form rippling with dark energy. "Prove your worth in battle, or be consumed by the darkness." With a roar, the Guardian lunged at them, its massive claws slashing through the air. Greta and Henrik dodged, their movements guided by a combination of instinct and the light from the box. The chamber erupted into chaos, the ground shaking as the Guardian's attack sent shockwaves through the stone. Greta remembered the words from the book and realized that the artifact was the key to defeating the Guardian. She gestured to Henrik, and together they moved towards the pedestal, dodging the Guardian's relentless attacks. With a final, desperate leap, Greta grasped the artifact, its cool surface pulsing with energy. The Guardian howled in rage, its form beginning to unravel as the artifact's light grew brighter. Greta raised the artifact high, its brilliance filling the chamber and banishing the shadows. The Guardian's form disintegrated, its dark essence absorbed by the artifact, leaving behind only silence and stillness. Greta and Henrik stood breathless, the artifact's light casting a warm glow over them. They had done it. They had defeated the Guardian and secured the means to save their village. With the artifact in hand, they made their way out of the cavern and back through the forest, the path now illuminated with a gentle, reassuring light. The oppressive darkness had lifted, replaced by a sense of peace and renewal. When they finally emerged from the forest, they were greeted by the first light of dawn. The village lay ahead, and they knew their journey was almost over. With the artifact, they could lift the curse and restore their home to its former glory. As they approached their village, Greta and Henrik felt a profound sense of accomplishment. They had faced unimaginable horrors and emerged victorious, their bond stronger than ever. The artifact's light would guide them, and with it, they would bring hope and healing to their people. The forest had tested them, but they had proven their worth. Together, they had conquered the darkness, and now they were ready to face whatever challenges the future held. United, unbreakable, and filled with a newfound strength.